the man-made humanitarian catastrophe in Tigray is well on its way to being one of the worst of the 21st century. Earlier this month, Office for Early Warning and Emergency Response announced that there are well over 6.5 million people in Tigray in dire need of humanitarian assistance.
Data from our office indicates that there are now 6.53 people in urgent need of food assistance.
The humanitarian catastrophe is a result of Ethiopian and Eritrean troops' deliberate and systematic destruction or looting of agricultural produces, agricultural implements, and water irrigation schemes across the state. Not to mention the looting and slaughter of livestock. Smallholder farmers have been the primary targets of the war, in addition to the systematic destruction of their personal wells, schools, and health facilities in rural communities were deliberately targeted and destroyed. The physical damage on public institutions across the state was followed by a blanket suspension of public services. At the end of June, when Tigrayan forces were able to repel Ethiopian and Eritrean forces from much of Tigray, including the capital, the Ethiopian government would impose an all-encompassing siege on Tigray, discontinuing all essential services into the region, including telecommunication, power supply, and banking, not to mention a blockade on food aid and basic supplies coming into the region. The siege on Tigray has been effective, with just 6% of necessary aid reaching Tigray since June of 2021.
حزون كاب سنة شاب تحسات شوعته تزقت زنورة رديئة تحت شوعته مئتاوي.
Less than 7% of much-needed aid has reached Tigray between June and December 2021.
But even before the start of the siege on the region in late June, humanitarian workers had very limited access within the region, due primarily to the Ethiopian government's refusal to establish a humanitarian corridor. A humanitarian corridor is a temporary demilitarized zone to allow the safe passage of humanitarian aid as well as refugees out of a crisis region. Humanitarian corridors have been put in place since the mid-20th century and have served to ensure safe access to humanitarian workers and refugees in many places, including in Bosnia during the 3-year-long Sarajevo siege. Since the start of the conflict in Tigray, however, the Ethiopian government has refused to establish any safe access into Tigray, allowing regional forces to obstruct humanitarian work with impunity. There are at least 11 access points into Tigray, all of which have been closed with the cooperation by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Tigray is located in northernmost Ethiopia, bordering Eritrea to the north, Sudan to the west, Amhara to the southwest, and the Afar region to the east and southeast, giving Tigray 11 access points. Humanitarian aid can reach Tigray through a land route from Addis Ababa through Dasse, Lalibela, and the Amhara region, and reach Mekelle through Yechila in southeastern Tigray. But this route, just like 4 others that either originate or pass through the Amhara region, have been blocked by the Amhara region forces, including a route from Bahar Dar through Debark that can reach Shire through western Tigray, and another route that can travel through Gondar into Maikadra and Shire. Another route can go through Bahar Dar and Gondar into Dansha and Shire. But this is not the only route where Amhara forces are blocking humanitarian aid from reaching Tigray. Amhara forces in western Tigray have not only taken part in an ethnic cleansing campaign, killing, torturing, and displacing millions, but have also taken part in hindering aid intended to reach Tigrayans through the area, blocking 2 possible aid routes from Sudan, including an essential aid route from the port of Sudan that could move through Maikadra, Humera in western Tigray, and then Shire, and another route through Tasannay, both blocked by Amhara militia and allies from Eritrea. But the presence of these forces in western Tigray is not only aimed at blocking aid routes, but has also been closed off for any movement, with the Ethiopian government breaching international rules on the conduct of war by blocking Tigrayans attempting to seek refuge in Sudan.
This is really the only safe place for many Tigrayans, and the Ethiopian forces, Ethiopian allied forces, Ethiopian government forces, we're told, are blocking that. That's a war crime. Blocking safe passage to fleeing communities would meet the metrics the guidelines for a war crime.
The remaining routes travel through Afar regional state but originate from Djibouti or Addis Ababa. These routes have been blocked off for much of the conflict, with no aid being allowed through this route since mid-December.
In the first place, by the way, it's not the only route we have to Magala or to Tigray, by the way. We have more than 10 alternative routes if you want to come to Magala or to Tigray. There are options, different options. They are doing it intentionally, by the way.
But the blockade on goods traveling through the Amhara region had started long before conflict erupted in November of 2020. Right-wing media ISAT, for example, had been calling for the blockade on Tigray for well over half a decade.
አንደኛም በአማራ ክልል የምንገኝ ኢትዮጵያውያን ከትግራይ በደሴም ወደ አዲስ አበባ ሁለተኛም ከወልዲያም ወረታም ከሽሬ ጎንደር ከሁመራ ጎንደር ከመተማ ጎንደር ያሉ መንገዶችን በድንጋይ በእንጨት መተላለፊያውን በመዝጋት የአፋር ወገኖቻችን ከትግራይ መቀሌ ከዊሃም በሸሂድ አፍዴራም አሳይታ የሚወስደውን በጠቅላላ በመውጣት በድንጋይ በእንጨት መተላለፊያውን በመዝጋት
Once extreme right-wing propaganda, it's been over 3 years now since Ethiopian government officials have started to take talking points from the media outlet. Now high-level officials, including ministers, are seen expressing similar sentiment. Former Minister for Economic Affairs, Minister Melaku Al-Lebel, is seen justifying the almost 2-year-long blockade on Tigray by Amhara vigilante group Fano almost a year before the start of the conflict.
የምትቃወሟቸውን አካላት መቃወማችሁን ስትገልጹ የምታሄሱበት የምትጠቀሙበት ቋንቋ ህዝብና ህዝብን ልብ ለልብ ሊያሻክር በሚችል መንገድ በተዘዋሪ መንገድ ነካ አርጎ አልፎ የሆነ ውጤት ምክንያቱም ያያየን ስለሆነ
እኔ በችግሩ ከተገለጸበት ቋንቋ በላይ የተፈጠረው ችግር ገዝፎ ከብሮ ይታየኛል። በዚህ ሀገር ላይ ያልተገባ ኢሰባዊ ድርጊቶች ተፈጽመዋል። ይሄን ድርጊት አለመናገር አለማውገዝ እና አለመታገል ነው ወንጀል የሚሆነው እንጂ በየትኛውም ቋንቋ ይሄ ድርጊት ቢገለጽ እኔ የሚያንስ ካልሆነ በስተቀር የሚበዛ መስሎ አይታየኝም።
አዴፓ እንደ አዴፓ አይደለ መንገድ ሲዘጋ የነበረው ወደ ትግራይ ክልል የሚያልፍ ንብረት እኮ እንዲቋረጥ ያደረገው ይሄ ህዝብ የመረረ ጥላቻ ለዛኛው ህዝብ ስላሳደረ ነው። ምክንያቱም የተጫኑት ንብረቶች ወይም የምግብም ይሁን የመጠጥ ሸቀጣ ሸቀጦች ተጭነው የሚሄዱት ለህዋት አይደለም ለትግራይ ህዝብ ነው። ለትግራይ ህዝብ የሚሄድን ንብረት እዚህ መንገድ ላይ አቋርጦ ማስቀረት የቻለ ህዝብ የመረረ ጥላቻ ያለው መሆኑን ያሳያል። እንዲያደርግ ደግሞ እናንተ ህዋት ላይ ያላችሁን ተቃውሞ ወይም ቀደም ሲል ጥፋተኞች ላይ የምታስተላልፏቸው መልእክቶች ህብረተሰባችሁን ለበለጠ የልብ መሻከር በሚያስችል መንገድ ነው።
የመጀመሪያው ነገር እኔ መግባባት ላይ መድረስ መቻል ያለብን አዴፓ ሌባን ኢሰባዊ ድርጊት የሚፈጽምን ዘራፊን ኃይል የሚደብቅ ከሆነ 10 ሰዎች ይሁን 15 ሰዎችም ይሁን መጠለያቸው አዴፓ እስከሆነ ድረስ አዴፓ መወገዝ አለበት። አዴፓን ሸፍኖ የሚይዝ የአማራ ክልል አዴፓ ወንጀለኛ ሆኖ አዴፓ ጥፋተኛ ሆኖ አዴፓን አቅፎ የሚይዝና የሚከላከል የአማራ ህዝብ ካለ የአማራ ህዝብ መወገዙ የሚቀርም አይመስለኝም። በተመሳሳይ ሁኔታ በትግራይ በዛ መንገድ ነው መታየት መቻል ያለበት።
President of Afar Regional State Awal Arba has gone on national television multiple times to say that regional authorities will not allow access into Tigray and considers the hindered of humanitarian aid into Tigray an important tactical force. People not taking part in hostilities have a right to humanitarian assistance. This right flows from the international humanitarian law as well as international human rights law, including the right to food and water in case of natural or other disasters. States have the responsibility to ensure this right, but where a party is not just unable but actively obstructionist, working to willfully impede the passage of relief supplies, these actions may be held as war crimes under the Rome Statute. The Ethiopian government has made it clear that it is not willing to allow humanitarian aid into Tigray by blocking not 1 or 2 access points into Tigray, but 11. The question remains to be if and when the Ethiopian government will be held accountable for its actions.